In a world where our healthcare system is collapsing and consuming a significant portion of our finances, the time for change is now. We believe that being proactive, focusing on prevention, and embracing wellness are the keys to taking control of our health. Welcome to the Change Life Destiny podcast series, where we highlight the latest and greatest technologies that help restore health, prevent disease, and promote wellness. I'm your host, Stephanie Hingstenberg, and we're thrilled to have you join us on this journey of transformation and wellness. Our first season was recorded at the annual Changing Life and Destiny conference, where health and wellness practitioners, professionals, and industry activists convened to reveal and discuss groundbreaking solutions to our current healthcare crisis. Our guest host, Natalie Needham, also the host of Biohacking Superhuman Performance, interviewed practitioners and exhibitors on the technologies being used in their practices and the real-life results they are seeing with their patients and clients. In this episode, Natalie speaks to Dr. Jerry Tennant about his groundbreaking work on understanding the body as an electrical system and using that knowledge to develop technologies that can restore health by recharging the body's batteries.
Dr. Jerry Tennant, it is such an honor to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here.
So I would say that we're probably halfway through the weekend, and we've been recording podcast after podcast, and you just keep coming up, sir. Your work on polarity, all of the massive body of education that you've created, and the number of people that you've inspired, practitioners in particular, is really unbelievable. So I thought it would be great to help the audience to understand some of your work and how this applies to them. And why is everybody talking about Dr. Tennant and polarity? And what is polarity anyway?
Thank you. Well, my story begins with the fact that I'm trained as an ophthalmologist, and I had a lot of fun doing cataract surgery and other sorts of things in my career as an ophthalmologist. One of the things that I got to do was the majority of the research for the laser that's used in LASIK surgery. And I think the story probably begins when I had a person come to me from India who had superficial corneal scars. And so I used the laser to carve off those scars off of his cornea. And what we didn't know at the time was that the laser wouldn't kill viruses. And this gentleman had leukemia. And so I released the viruses when I carved off the scars, and they went through my mask and into my nose and into my brain. And I developed encephalitis. So I got to where I could see a patient and know what was wrong with them, but I couldn't remember how to write a prescription. Also developed spastic movements, so I would be sitting there and do something like shaking like that, which doesn't work really well if you're operating inside somebody's eyeball.
No, tight space.
And I had overwhelming fatigue. So I went to the best doctors I could find, both in Dallas, and then I went to New York and Boston and talked to the head immunologists at both of those places. And they said, well, there are 3 viruses in your brain. We don't know what to do about it, so don't call us. We'll call you. Good luck.
That's awesome.
So I go back home, and I have to quit working. I'm sleeping 16 hours a day. I have 2 or 3 hours a day in which I could understand a newspaper, and then like a light switch, it goes off and I can't understand it anymore. So I had to make a decision, lay down and die like they suggested, or figure out how to get myself well. So I chose the latter. And so the concept came to me, a couple of them was one that if I could figure out how to make one cell work, I can make them all work. Because even though all of the cells in the body look completely different, brain cell looks different from a heart cell, they really have all the same hardware. Mm-hmm. And they just have different software. And so I began to think, okay, if I can figure out how to make that work, I can perhaps get well. Then I started thinking about, sometimes there are all these different medical modalities. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. So sometimes chiropractic works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes acupuncture works, sometimes it doesn't, and on and on. And I thought if I could find the common denominator in all of those, I could figure out how to get well. because then I could do what worked. So I began going down that road, and I began to read cellular biology books, which I hadn't done in 30 years. And in each of the cellular biology books, I found that they had either a sentence or a page devoted to the concept of pH. And they said cells are supposed to run at a pH of 7.35 to 7.45. Well, I just remembered something from way back in college. It had something to do with acid-base balance, but that's about all I knew.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started studying pH, I discovered it was the measurement of voltage in a liquid. I thought, voltage in a liquid. Cells have to have voltage to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, that begins to make sense. And so then I began to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to figure out what my voltage is? And I discovered that a chap named Nakatani was the first person to use modern electronics to measure acupuncture circuits, and he published in 1951. In 1952, Reinhold Voll in Germany did basically the same thing. And so I got Nakatani's rather rudimentary equipment and started measuring, and I found that where my brain should be running at 25 millivolts, it was running around 4 millivolts. So now I knew why it didn't work.
Well, and meanwhile, you're doing all this research. Like, it's pretty impressive, right? Like, you basically made a decision to take whatever energy you did have and marshal it into this one job.
Yeah, well,
It's quite impressive.
yeah, it was like, okay, I've got to figure this out in these 2 or 3 hours a day I can think.
Yeah.
Or what's the other option?
Yeah. All right. So 4 millivolts, we're down 21 millivolts here.
Yeah.
So imagine how much more you can figure out when you get that running.
There you go. So I got Nakatani's rudimentary equipment, started studying that. And then I saw, because he was working with acupuncture circuits, I started going down that road.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started reading acupuncture books, they didn't make much sense. They were talking about this is too hot and that's too cold. And there's, the
wet and dry
and all this stuff. So I found an interesting book called The Web That Has No Weaver. It was written by an American acupuncturist trying to explain acupuncture to a Western mind. And so I scanned in the first chapter of it, and I went back and changed those terminologies that didn't make much sense into electronic terms. So where it said heat, it was high, something was high. When it was cold, it was low. When there was resistance to the flow, it was a resistor, and so forth. And once I changed the terms that didn't make any sense at all into electronic terms, all of a sudden it made total sense.
Wow.
And so then I began to go down that road. And then the next thing I began to realize is that the human body is a portable electronic device.
Mm-hmm.
And all portable electronic devices have to have a battery. And so I discovered that the major batteries in the body are our muscles. Our muscles are piezoelectric. So what's that funny word mean? If you take a piece of quartz and you squeeze it with a pair of pliers, it emits electrons. And so whenever you do any exercise, you're actually emitting electrons. But fortunately, our muscles are also rechargeable batteries. Now, I discovered that our muscles are stacked one on top of each other in a very specific order, like stacking batteries in a flashlight to form a power pack. So every organ in the body has its own battery pack. So if that battery pack loses its charge, then you don't have the voltage for things to work. Not only do you need 25 millivolts for cells to work, but you need 50 millivolts to make new ones. Now, sometimes physicians and other professionals get confused because they say, well, cells run at 80 or 90 millivolts. Well, that's only if you have a cell in a petri dish and put an electrode inside the membrane and outside the membrane, you'll measure 80 or 90 millivolts. But the environment in which we're designed to run, as any cellular biology book will tell you, is between minus 20 to minus 25 millivolts. Now, I should mention this business about plus and minus. If you take a pH meter, which is basically a sophisticated voltmeter, it has a switch on it. You can switch it into millivolts or into pH.
Okay.
So what you do is you put that into a liquid, and it will tell you if the liquid is an electron donor or an electron stealer.
Okay.
So if by convention, if it's an electron donor, you put a minus sign in front of the voltage. If it's a electron stealer, you put a plus sign.
Okay.
And then you convert that to a logarithmic scale from 0 to 14 called pH. So minus 400 millivolts of electron donor is the same thing as a pH of 14. Plus 400 millivolts of electron stealer is the same as a pH of 0. But it's much easier to think about millivolts than it is to think about pH and to get your mind around understanding how everything's working. So the next thing that I ran across, well, first of all, I mapped out the muscle battery packs and discovered that people have not understood what an acupuncture meridian is for 3,000 years. They've described it and what it does, but they couldn't figure out what it was. Well, it turns out that an acupuncture meridian is simply a stack of muscle batteries. So we have 12 stacks of muscle batteries. So every organ in the body has its own battery pack.
Okay.
Now, the next piece of the puzzle is that if you take a rechargeable battery and you drain it to 0, it flips its polarity upside down. If you take a battery and put it upside down in a battery charger, it won't take a charge. That's exactly what happens in all chronic disease. All chronic disease begins when you drain one of your battery packs to 0 and flip the polarity, and all of the organs that are on that circuit no longer have power. Simple as that. So once you begin to think in terms of circuits, it changes everything. First of all, if you look at what was going on with me, I felt like somebody was sticking an ice pick in my left big toe. My spleen was enlarged and hurt. My stomach hurt all the time. I lost the vision in my left eye, and I couldn't think. So I go to all these various specialists, and all of them said, well, you have idiopathic neuropathy. Well, you know what the word idiopathic means?
We don't know where it comes from.
I don't have a clue.
Yeah.
And so, but once I began to understand what I'm talking about, you realize that the big toe and the macula of the eye are on the same circuit.
No kidding.
As is the spleen, as is the stomach, as is the frontal lobes of your thinking part of your brain. It's all in the same circuit. So if you come home and you open the fridge and it's hot in there, you go in the living room and the TV won't turn on, and you go into the bedroom and the lamp won't turn on, guess what? You blew a circuit breaker, right?
Right.
That's the way our bodies are wired up.
And those are the meridians.
In circuits. Those are the meridians.
Wow.
And so I began to start checking then and discovered that no matter what was wrong with people, the power supply to that organ had flipped its polarity. And so that was a major turning point of me of really understanding what to do about it. And so I also discovered that included in that were malignancies. That, you would never see a woman with breast cancer that hadn't flipped the polarity in the stomach circuit, because that's the power supply to the breast. And it's well known and documented in standard medical literature that women who have breast cancer often eventually get ovarian cancer. Well, that makes perfect sense because they're on the same circuit. So then the issue is, okay, what are you going to do about it? Well, discovered that there are different kinds of energy. Everybody knows about electromagnetic energy, which is electricity and radio waves and all that stuff. But few people know about scalar energy. And scalar energy it fills the universe. But also it is, as has been proven by Konstantin Mael, a physicist in Germany, it's the power supply for our DNA. Scalar energy powers the DNA. It reads the genetic code, communicates with cells nearby through scalar energy. When you make a new cell, it transfers the genetic code to the new cell. So basically, scalar energy is the essence of life itself. Well, I eventually figured out how to make a device that will emit scalar energy, and we call that a biotransducer. So when I apply the biotransducer to the body, to the circuits, it's flipped its polarity, it flips it back.
So, wow. So is it almost like the acupuncture trigger point? Because when we go for acupuncture, the acupuncturist will target on that circuit, as it were.
Those specific points are believed by acupuncturists to have specific effects on specific organs rather than the polarity.
I see.
So with the biotransducer, for example, you can put it on the top of your head and it'll flip all of the polarities that have been flipped. They'll flip them all back up.
Really?
You can put it between your legs and shine it up the spine. It does the same thing. So once you flip the batteries back up, they're still discharged. And now you have to charge them back up again.
Right.
And so you need electromagnetic energy for that. And we have a device called the biomodulator, which puts out a waveform that's rather unique. There are very few devices in the marketplace that actually have the proper waveform to concentrate energy and recharge the system. So it's a two-step process. You flip your batteries back up, you recharge them. Once they're recharged, then the body goes back to work and starts making new cells and healing you. The body never forgets how to heal itself. It just needs the power to do it, and it needs all the parts to make new cells, because we don't get well by taking damaged cells and making them work again. We get well by making new cells. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I'm out of time. So
no, you're not.
Oh, I'm not out of time.
No,
Sorry.
you got 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, good.
Give us now. So we've figured out. So you have the technology that flips the battery back.
Yes.
Right, and then another device that delivers the energy to the battery so that it can start working again. Recharging. And now, at this point, do we now start to look at, is there any, and you were just saying, so now we need the materials to make new cells. We need to, and I'm sure at some point there's a piece to this where if there are toxins accumulated that are getting in the way, or
Exactly.
heavy metals that are sitting in receptors that don't belong there.
So you need the voltage to make cells work and to make new ones. You need the materials to make this new cells, and you need to get rid of toxins that damage cells as fast as you make them.
Yeah.
So now you've, in a matter of minutes, we can get a person's electronic system turned back on.
Yeah.
But now we want to ask the question, well, why did it flip off in the first place? Because that's where the root cause is. Mm-hmm. We've identified 5 different reasons that the batteries eventually drain and flip. So the first one is thyroid hormone. The thyroid hormone T3, not T4, but T3, controls the voltage of every cell membrane in the body. It also controls the total number of mitochondria in the body. So it's very essential that you get the amount of T3 available correct. Now, unfortunately, docs are trained to look at what's called TSH and sometimes T4. And if those are normal, they tell you your thyroid's working fine.
Yeah.
But to convert T4 to T3 requires 8 different cofactors, and most people are deficient in those. And so you have to also supply those to make that system work. Next, we look at scars. So fascia is that shiny white stuff you see around the muscles when you carve a turkey. Mm-hmm. And it's the body's wiring system. And it's actually a semiconductor electronically. And a semiconductor is a collection of molecules arranged in such a way that electrons move through them very rapidly, but only in one direction, which explains why if you put a drop of essential on your foot like that, it's in your brain because it goes up the semiconductor of your fascia. Well, if you put a scar across it or you put a tattoo into it, it frays your wiring system. So even if you got your battery charged up, the electrons can't go anyplace because your wiring system's screwed up.
Right.
So fixing scars is something that we must do. And by the way, that's very easily done with the biotransducer. So thyroid scars and then dental infections.
Big
so
one.
When the embryo is forming, it forms the brain first, and then circuits go from the brain down into the rest of the body. And on their way down, they go through very specific teeth. So our teeth, each tooth becomes an integrated part of a specific circuit. Mm-hmm. Now, if you think about a string of lights, if you get corrosion in one of the sockets, it blows that whole string of lights, doesn't it?
Right.
Same thing happens in your body. If you get infection in the bone around a tooth, it blows that circuit. Mm-hmm. And so dental becomes a very important part.
Right.
And most people don't realize that one of the worst offenders is a root canal.
Yeah.
A root canal tooth is dead. The dentists are the only physicians that think you can get away with leaving dead tissue in the body. No other doctor believes that. Boyd Haley at the University of Kentucky has shown that one root canal shuts down 63% of your immune system.
Wow.
And so you've got to look for dental things that block the circuits. Then we have emotions. So our emotions and our memories are stored with scalar energy in the body. Now, the difference between the two is the frequency. So think about an orchestra. If all the instruments are in tune, it's beautiful music. But if one of the violins is out of tune, you hear it screeching in front of the rest of the orchestra.
Right.
So our memories are in tune with our body, and the body's happy for them to be there. But our stressful emotions are like a screeching violin. So we build a wall around it so we don't have to listen to it. And that wall blocks the circuit, drops the voltage, and that's how our emotions make us sick.
Mm-hmm.
Now, fortunately, because these are frequencies, again, you can tune them with scalar energy. So it's easy to find the distortion in your field, and using the biotransducer, you can tune a stressful emotion into being just a memory. Very powerful. It just takes a short period of time.
Very powerful.
And then finally, we have toxins. And so all toxins are electron stealers and thus lower your voltage. If you think about, every atom has its own frequency, and you can use a spectrophotometer and measure that. Every molecule has its own set of frequencies, so you can use a mass spectrometer and identify that. So what we do is we have the ability to scan a person and find frequencies that don't belong there. And then because frequencies go, say one goes up and down,
Mm-hmm.
if you use the opposite, it goes down and then up. In physics, that's called destructive interference. The two collapse each other and poof, they're gone.
Yeah.
So it's very powerful to when you find that there are toxins in your body, whether those toxins are microorganisms or toxins that are chemical, whatever, you can very quickly and easily neutralize them in a matter of seconds. And so, again, we've got thyroid, scars, dental infections, emotions, and toxins. And when you have some combination of those five, it will drain your battery to zero and flip it. The elephants in the room are always, in very severe chronic illness, are always dental infections and emotions. And so I like to say it's like sticking a screwdriver in the wall socket over there. It's going to blow the breaker. I can flip the breaker on as many times as I want to, and as long as the screwdriver's in the wall, it keeps flipping off.
Right.
So until I pull the screwdriver out of the wall, I can't keep the circuit on.
Absolutely.
And so I have to go through each five of those things in order to be sure that we've gotten rid of the screwdriver in the wall that flips our circuits. Once you fix the thing that caused it, the root cause, now the body's back to the way God made it.
I love it. What an elegant masterclass, Dr. Tennant.
Oh.
That was delivered beautifully and really powerfully. So you're an educator and a leader. Obviously, there are many practitioners and doctors in these walls anyway that work with your technologies and apply your principles in practice. And it's just really an honor to get to speak to the person who came up and figured all this stuff out. So when you walk around, when you look, I don't know if you've had a chance to look through the magazine and look at the 100 technologies, is there anything in there that inspires you? Because, to your point, we got to get the screwdriver out of the wall. Right. And I think that a lot of these technologies and a lot of the work that a lot of these other people are doing is trying to figure out ways to help the body to do its healing work. And your technology is the bridge. If we can get rid of the toxins, address the thyroid and the whole 9 yards, if we haven't flipped that battery up and powered it back up again, it could almost be the missing link.
Well, let me say that I'm thrilled to see so many people interested now in the concept of energy in the body and voltage in the body. When I started this 25 years ago, everybody said, "Oh, poor Jerry, his cheese has slipped off the cracker."
Jesus, that's a good expression.
But now it's changing, and I'm thrilled about that. The thing that I think is missing from a lot of the work is that if you go around and you look at a lot of the things that people are doing in this field, it tries to address maybe one thing. Mm-hmm. But again, very few are addressing dental and very few are addressing emotions. And so, I have a lot of people come to me and say, well, I purchased this device, whatever. And they said, it made me feel a little bit better, but I'm still not well. I've got a ways to go. Something's missing. Yeah, it's because you haven't addressed all of these various things. So again, even in integrative medicine, we have some of the problem that they have in allopathic medicine, in that you get focused on one thing. So there are clinics that just give IVs. There are clinics that just do PEMF mats. There are clinics that just do ozone. There are clinics that just do hyperbaric. And all of those cover up some of your symptoms, but they haven't fixed the problem, which is the flip polarity.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so interesting. But I think that's what events like this one are all about, right? The hope is that as we bring together the leaders in each space, as we bring together the technologies into one space and the doctors who are applying them, we can start to get into a space where people start to collaborate and start to understand about the layering, or in the biohacking space, we talk about stacking things so that we can start to build that hierarchy of repair and healing, that where all of these things can come together. I often refer to all these different technologies as a piece of the puzzle. And each one doesn't necessarily apply to each person. And the magic is in the practitioner who can access these and understand how to apply which ones to each patient. But the dental thing is massive. I mean, I've interviewed a couple of holistic dentists over the last couple of years, and it's such a blind spot in health these days.
Well, the problem is you can't really get your mind around how a tooth can be a major cause of you having a malignancy unless you understand circuits.
Yeah.
Because again, how could you explain the relationship between pain in my toe and loss of vision in my eye?
Right.
You can't.
No.
But with a circuit, understanding circuits, it makes perfect sense.
Oh, like I said before, a truly elegant explanation. It simplifies it, but in a way that makes complete sense. And it's not so far removed from the actual concept that you're like, nah, it's a bit of a stretch, right? It actually makes perfect sense. So we are coming up on time. So I do want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. This has been fabulous. And in my own little way, I want to thank you for the work that you do. It's just, it's really inspiring.
Well, thank you. It's been an interesting journey, and it continues.
Absolutely.
One of the fun things I'm having fun with right now is I was asked to join a think tank to figure out ALS.
Nice.
And so I started treating ALS in November, and we've treated somewhere between 15 and 20 so far, and it appears that we've turned them all around.
That's amazing. That is truly amazing.
And so I'm not going to claim that we've found the solution until we get a year out, but it's fun to see people. Like a woman came to me a couple of weeks ago and she said, my mom hasn't been able to walk or get out of the bathtub for more than a year. She did both yesterday.
Wow.
And,
that's got to keep you going.
That's why at age 83, I'm still going to work.
I'm a huge fan. Of that concept. So thank you so much. Where can people learn more about your work, or maybe even do you have a mechanism by which they can either connect with you or any of the practitioners that work with your work?
Well, so my clinic is in the Dallas area in a town called Irving.
Okay.
And my website is tenantinstitute.com. And so if you go to my website, you can see videos, see how to contact us. We're thrilled when people decide to come to our clinic. We also, one of the things that I did was on the nutrition piece is that I went through the physiology books and figured out all the things that cells need. And so we have a thing called Tennant products. So if you make a smoothie out of that, you have everything you need to make cells. Whatever else you eat that day is just for fuel, which makes life simple.
Nice.
And then Synergy Medical Group is the medical device company that sells the devices that I develop. And it's SENERGY, and it's synergy.us.
Synergy.us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a total pleasure.
So y'all be well.
Thank you for tuning in to the Change Life Destiny podcast series. Join us each week to hear more thought-provoking conversations like this and the astounding results that are empowering people to lead healthier, happier lives. Subscribe to our podcast to stay up to date on how we're revolutionizing our healthcare system. Visit us at www.changelifedestiny.com to learn more about the practitioners, technologies, and how you can take control of your health.